Okay, here it is, January 31st, 2014, and things have moved along a little bit since we last talked. I had a problem with obtaining lumber, and that seems to have been pretty much solved. I've got most of the lumber I need. I'm having final deliveries in about 2 or 3 days. So it's been an interesting process, but the other things I've been doing in the interim since I took my Christmas vacation was to, number one, do a lot more reading in a book from John Gardner. Both books, his Dory book and his small craft building book. And every time I read it, I find more and more information that's really valuable and insightful too. And I've converted a lot of the drawing details into, not converted, but elaborated, if you will, into a CAD program that I've got. And I've created some drawings that give me a lot more working level stuff instead of flipping back and forth through the book all the time, that focus on areas of concern I've got. You know, like for example, the stem, you know, how that fits to the bottom when the bottom is sloping as it comes up, because it's a bent bottom to the boat. Anyhow, other things I've done in addition to buying the lumber is I bought some small tools and you know, special, you know, the special screws that you need here are silicon bronze, and they stay up really well in saltwater environments. And they have a special drill, a screw bit that goes in these things. It looks like a Phillips head, but it's not a Phillips head. It's called a Frierson bit, and it's a lot more secure. And anyhow, I painted them green just to keep them separated from my Phillips bit. And as you can see, I've got more little doodads on planes and that sort of thing. I've been practicing. I have, because some of the lumber I bought was old and sitting in warehouses for a long period of time, I ran it through my planer here, and that was kind of an interesting thing to see how well that planer would hold up under running some of these big pieces of oak and everything through it. I've also started the process of, well, almost finished the process of making patterns for the various sections of the frames that have to go into the boat. And I'll show you some of that a little bit, but it's to help me make sure that every piece I cut is cut the same, you know, instead of measuring each one as I get ready to put it through the saw. I'm just going to be able to lay the pattern on a piece of wood and mark it out and cut it up. But then you have to spend a lot of time doing the fine-tuning of the pieces to make sure they actually fit really perfectly. But so I expect that probably in the next week or so I'm going to actually start cutting the oak for the frames. My sequence is to like I say, cut and assemble the frames for the boat and both stems, and then I will assemble the bottom. And one of the things about the dory is the round hull dory, as opposed to the flat-sided dories. You're supposed to build them upside down because it makes it a lot easier to lay the planking on them. So I have to put what they call a backbone down through the garage here that the bottom will sit on, and it's going to have a little curve to the backbone. It's basically like a piece of 2x10 that I shape into a curve so that and clamp it down so that the bottom actually has a curve to it. and secure the frames to the boat as I'll have to have them in place before I actually put the bottom over the top of the frames, and then screw from the bottom down into the frames. And there's some cleats, old cleats that hold the planks or the bottom together. And once the frames go on, then you can start laying and the stem, and get all of that put together. Then you can start laying the planks on the sides. And the first plank, of course, will be the bottom plank, which is called the garboard plank. And it's going to be a real struggle with that plank, because the wood is fairly stiff, and along those lines, the wood that I found for the planks, this guy over in the other side of the Seattle area over there, north of Seattle, had brought a bunch of old wood down from Canada, from Alaska. He was a fisherman up there for many years, and he brought this stuff back down. He had a warehouse over there by Lake Stevens. And it's old growth, clear vertical grain fir. He had some 2 by 12 by 20 foot pieces, and I've taken them to a mill and had them resawn into 1/2 inch thick by 12 inch wide by 20 foot long planks, and they're magnificent looking pieces of wood, really, and which is going to force me into making the boat. It means I'm not going to paint the boat. In order to have that grain show up, I'm going to probably wind up putting a clear coat of fiberglass on it so that the wood grain will show through. And I'll wind up with all of the places where I've had to run screw holes into the wood. I'm going to do what they call plug the holes, and instead of just putting putty in them and painting over it. I'm going to try to keep the wood looking as clear as I can. But it'll be some of the challenges we see as we go through this thing, and I'll probably start, when I get the frames started assembling, I'll take some clips of those when they're going together, and show you some of the challenges I've got when I start cutting up the stems. And as we go through the process, I'll keep adding to it, and hopefully I'll be able to put it all together in a form that makes sense before the end of the boat period. But we'll go through, once you get the frames and the planks on the boat, then you have to take it off and turn it right side up so that you can go inside and put in all of the inside parts, and which include a lot of the oak gunwale, gunnel they call it, that goes along the trim of the sheer outsides of the boat, and has the rub strips on it. There's the stem hook, the breast hook, and there's a lot of detail in the supports for the breast hook and the seating arrangements. There's seat risers that have to be installed, and since this is it's not going to be a sailboat. It's primarily a rowing boat, but I'm going to put a motor well in it, and that's some of the detail that has to go together. And I've got details on that in John Gardner's drawings, but and it might be sufficient, but I'm going to may convert some of that to CAD as well, so I can get a better view of how I think it's going to look. But and as progress goes, and then we'll start into the finishing process, and hopefully, my hope is that by the summertime, and maybe even sooner, depends on how well I adapt myself to the processes and how little wood I mess up in the process, because some of this clear vertical grain fir is not replaceable if I make mistakes with it, unfortunately. So stay tuned. It's going to be interesting.